We are going to cover in today's session developing assessments aligned with learning objectives. My name is Christina Churchill, and I am the Academic Technology Director for the School of Business. Hopefully we'll spend the next 30 or so minutes, 30, 40 minutes just talking about this and why this is important. I do want to point out, if you're an attendee, if you want to, I'd love for this to be interactive, and it makes it a little bit challenging for it to be interactive since it's a webinar, but I would encourage you to type in the chat or in the Q&A area any questions, and I do have a moderator that will interrupt me and ask the question, but I do want this to be as interactive as possible so you could leave here with the confidence in this information that we'll cover. So I guess the first question is why should our assessments and our learning objectives and our activities, why should they be aligned? What is the purpose? And we'll cover that. I think that the most important purpose is when a student takes your class, they have the idea, most of them probably are taking it because they have to take it, but even if they have to take it, them understanding what is the goal of this class, what should they know at the end of this class, what kind of knowledge or skill set or thing. That's kind of the beginning phases of that. And then aligning and making sure that everything flows according to what that objective was. So let's take a look at this quickly, this little chart, because I feel like having a visual helps tie everything together. So you have your learning objective, and they should be able to do a certain task, and we'll talk a little bit about what a learning objective is and how to put it together, but the task that they need to be able to do by the end of the course. And within that, everything that you do should tie into what that learning objective is. So what that means is any type of instructional activity. If that means you're going to watch a video, if that means they do a special collaboration session where they're discussing certain things, whatever they're doing in class and even out of class in association to your course should then tie back to the learning objective. From that, the activity, also the assessments. What we shouldn't have, for example, is just random questions on an assessment that really don't tie back to the learning objective. There's no reason for that. You're not, when you're assessing your student, you should be assessing, did they meet what skill level or what knowledge they should have in the learning objective? And that should be aligned to make sure that you're really truly assessing the student for the skill that they should have by the end of your course. So when we start, from the beginning, you have to take a look at what are learning objectives, how do you write learning objectives, and where, how you can pull all of this together in making it understandable. So learning objectives, first of all, should be very concise. Very elaborate learning objectives, the student will look at it, it's very confusing. It should be concise, it should be measurable. You shouldn't, if it says that you should be able to list a certain thing or evaluate a certain thing, you should be able to say, okay, well, yes, they're able to evaluate this, and you should be able to assess this accordingly. So they're measurable because they're evaluable. I don't know if that's a word, but so really when you're developing these objectives, you're taking a look at three things. Number one is attitude. A learning objective could include a change of how a learner chooses to act, okay? So, so in your learning objective, it could be that now, because of the course they took, they have a new insight of how to handle certain situations, or maybe a new insight on environmental pollution or things like that. Whatever the attitude may have changed. The next kind of type of learning objective is a skill. So improving a task or learning a new skill. So for example, a learning objective could be that they have the ability to run statistical analysis using SPSS, for example, whatever it may be. But that is a skill, and so that would be a learning objective. Another type of learning objective is knowledge, so an increase of knowledge as far as, and typically this is facts. So this, believe it or not, even though it's the word knowledge, it's probably at the lower level of Bloom's taxonomy, or the lower level of knowledge, because most of it is having to do with memorization. You know, they know this particular information, they can't really apply it or anything, but they just know the life cycle of whatever, the butterfly. They know, they have that memorized, but it's at a lower level of knowledge. So those are the kind of the types of learning objectives. And again, within these types, what you should be doing is, if I am assessing a knowledge kind of information or a learning objective, then what would happen is I would take, let's say, a quiz that asks questions about that knowledge to assess the knowledge. But if you're trying to change, or your learning objective is a skill, so again, going back to doing a statistical analysis of SPSS and knowing how to do the statistical analysis, you really shouldn't be using a quiz to assess that, because your learning objective is to know how to do that task, right? So the taking that task and assessing them doing that task, however that looks, that's more of an assessment that is aligned with the learning objective, rather than a multiple choice quiz that asks questions about SPSS, right? So as you can see there, there's a misalignment, because really, yes, maybe you're using a bunch of vocabulary words that they may need to learn how to use that program, but it's not really assessing the skill level. And if the goal of the course, or the learning objective of the course, is to know how to do that skill, having that as a learning objective, your assessments should be lined up, and not having a multiple choice quiz, for example, but having maybe an assessment of a task that they have to do that shows that them doing that quiz or that skill. So does that kind of make sense on attitude, skills, and knowledge in there? And I don't have any questions so far.
No questions? Not so far. I think you're doing good.
All right. So continuing on, and again, you have to take a look at, before looking at aligning your assessments, you need to understand like the objectives themselves. So making sure that your objective has an action verb tied to it. So an action verb, so you want it to be concise, you want it to be measurable, and you want it to be some sort of action. So these are some action verbs that I listed that kind of fall in the category of attitude, skill, and knowledge. So for example, if I wanted for them to label the life cycle of a butterfly, let's say, okay, that would fall under the knowledge, and that would be an assessment. The labeling part is the assessment, and it would fall under the knowledge category. If I want them to compute something in SPSS, then that would fall under the skills. So again, those would be learning objectives, but again, then you would build your activity and you would build your assessments according to what you're asking them to do in the learning objective. So taking a look at why should these activities be aligned? So why should learning objectives align with the instructional activities and the assessments themselves? And I would say the first thing is, when you have it aligned, it increases the probability that the instructor provides really the opportunities for students to learn and practice the knowledge and skills that they'll they'll need to know, right? So it's really important, especially when you have scaffolding between courses. So if I'm doing accounting 101 and now my student moves to the next level of accounting, if my assessments were only, okay, these are multiple choice on vocabulary, but it wasn't necessarily the skill set of knowing, doing certain skills related to accounting, and then they go into another course that requires the mastery of those skills, then there becomes a learning gap. And so, again, taking a look at the objectives of that course and really making sure that, whatever the tasks are, whatever the assessments are, really directly related to the learning objective itself. The other reason is when you do have the assessments and the objectives align, when students get good grades, that's actually reflecting that they actually learned in the class. And so it's not necessarily of mastery of, well, they were good test takers, but they really learned whatever the material, whatever the goal was in that particular course, that they learned that content, however it was. So again, going back to knowing how to use or do statistical analysis with SPSS, if everything is aligned in my course and my activities, for example, my activities were videos on how do you do certain tasks, and maybe some activities would be, okay, compute this or do an analysis of this using the software itself, and then the assessment is the same. That all ties together, and in the end will reflect, oh yes, this student did master these learning objectives, and therefore that when they do get good grades, that means that they did have that mastery of those learning objectives for the course. But many times what happens is objectives and assessments are misaligned. And so what I can tell you on when things are misaligned is it causes a lot of frustration for students, because there are many times that they'll ask themselves, why in the world am I doing this? This makes no sense. And if your students are asking why they're doing this specific task, they're not understanding that either they're not understanding what the objective was of the course, or maybe what you're asking them to do isn't really even tied into the objective. So, having these already predefined and pre-set up helps you guide your course a lot more concisely. And they know that if they do the things that they need to do to get a good grade in that course, that the end result for the student will be that they have mastered those learning objectives. Okay. Any questions so far? Doing good? Okay. So a little bit about course alignment, and actually if you Google course alignment or aligning assessments with learning objectives on Google, that you will find a plethora of information from really great universities that will cover how to do this and what the importance is. So it kind of should flow. You have your objectives defined. You create your activities. So in today's environment, your activities may include, watching videos or reading specific text, but it also could include breakout rooms, right? So really like using those breakout rooms that you're using in your classroom, not just randomly talking about things that you decide, but really being purposeful in what the activities are and aligning them in the learning objectives. And then again, having the assessments analyze truly what the objective was. So let's see. I think that kind of covers stuff. Let me give some examples on some assessments. So I think we need to be really clear on what things. So for example, many people like to give final exams, and now everything's converted into Canvas and having final exams in Canvas. Well, The problem is, although we do need a grade, right? At any point in time, you need to give the assessment of the student. Yes, they did pass this course, or no, they didn't. And so from there, you have to come up with, what activities am I going to do to give them this grade? But I think we default quickly into, well, I'm going to give them a final exam with all these multiple choice questions. And because multiple choice questions are easy, right? They grade things quickly. I have 120 students, and it gives me an assessment really fast if they know the information. But I think you need to go back and take a look at, well, what is knowledge? So was the learning objective in the course just that lower knowledge level, and they're just gaining information, and then they're just giving back information to you? So if that's the case, maybe a quiz is the only solution. But if your learning objectives are taking a look at a set skill, or maybe a set type of attitude change, maybe your assessments need to be relooked at, and you don't default to, well, I just need to give a quiz with the final exam, right? So for example, let's say in a finance course, you you throw out questions and it's just multiple choice, but instead take a case analysis or some other type, and have them analyze it, and have them maybe extract some financial information from, or calculate financial information from the case that you gave them, the information that you gave them. So there's a lot of different ways that you can take a look at and re-look at, okay, what am I delivering? What am I measuring? And is that aligned again with the whole objective of the class? Or am I just doing the assessment because I need to give that final grade to that student? And really taking a look at that, and assessing to see if that is the best solution for what you're doing or for what you're assessing. So some other opportunities for assessments could be, besides quizzes, different types of assignments, assignments that could include writing assignments, but also maybe could include a video assignment, collaboration, doing projects together where students are working together in solving a problem. One of the things, I was in a webinar earlier today, and this particular faculty, they did group assignments all the time, but what she did was she grouped them according to their skill level. And she didn't group them where they all had a mixed of skill level. She took all the students with the highest skill level, and then all the students with medium, and all the students with the lowest skill level. Because what she didn't want to do in this group work is have a group of 5 students with a varying range of skill level, and then have the top student do all the work, for example. So I thought that was really interesting, but really pulling in collaboration and group projects will alleviate a little bit of the grading burden, because I know that if you say, okay, well, I'm going to eliminate all of these quizzes because really I'm not measuring knowledge necessarily in my learning objective. I'm really measuring them being able to analyze, or them being able to create, or them being able to do other higher level things. Well, usually the higher level things will take more time. So being able to set up a group, for example, in Canvas, or even a group where when you do your synchronous sessions, students can do breakout rooms. Those are options that then they can work together and collaborate. And so then as a faculty, you're not having to deal with grading 100, particular projects, but if you have a group of 5, maybe it's less than that. So those are some opportunities. Other assessments, again, videos. Students can easily create videos, even using Zoom. All students have access to Zoom accounts. So if you're familiar with recording in Zoom, that's something that they can do and deliver an MP4 file to you as an opportunity for an assessment. So really taking a look at what are you assessing? Is it truly lined up with what they're supposed to be learning? I think that that will add a lot of value to your course. It will make learning a lot more meaningful for your students. Okay, I'll stop for a second and let's see if we have any questions. I feel like I was rambling a lot. Let me stop my share. Doesn't look like we have. Do we have any questions at all?
I haven't seen any come in.
And you know what? I just realized, I think I can, if you, I can click on this button to allow to talk. I wonder if I can, if anyone wants to talk and ask questions, I think I can activate that if you guys are interested. So what are some challenges, and it looks like there's only a couple of us on, or a couple of you on here. What are some challenges that you may have had with aligning your assessments with your learning objectives? Do you have any? Oh, I'm going to allow. Hi, Linda. I put, since it's only a couple of us, I went ahead and I said allow to talk.
Thank you. I unmuted myself too. So this is really helpful. I've been teaching at SMU for 21 years, but learning objectives and using Canvas had never been really necessary since I was hired to perform a service class for the international grad students, the TAs, and it's based on skill development and feedback rather than weighted assignments and grades. So they're pass, fail, and very much feedback oriented for individual students as if they were my private clients, as well as in a class with different skill levels. So I just wanted to say that this is very helpful to me, and I'm able to see a lot better, with these follow-up presentations on how to create learning objectives and assessments that are required now for my courses that never had been before. So the question really is just, is there any difference in the way that you write learning objectives and assess when you do have students at different levels? So some of them are very polished, or rather they communicate very well and they're just polishing, and I'm giving them very, picky, helpful things to move them up a little bit from where they started. Whereas other students might have severe pronunciation or other problems, and their goal is to achieve a better intelligibility. And so we're assessing different things for different students.
What I would recommend is setting up your learning objective to be where you're identifying an improvement, right? So it's generic enough to identify an improvement in whatever the skill is. And then my recommendation would be, and you may already do this, is do a pre-assessment and then a post-assessment, and then be able to see what the differences are. So because your students are all at different levels, be able to, whatever, let's say that you have 10 things that you really want them to improve on, and those 10 things may be in your learning objectives that they need to try to improve wherever they are in their skill set, right?
Yeah,
so that's, so I would do a pre-assessment, and then that way you can see, oh, okay, this student needs to work on this, this, and this, and they know that they need to work on that. And then at the end of the course, see the post-assessment, so then they can see what the growth was. And then it really will align with what the learning objective was as far as an improvement in that set skill.
Yeah, well, Christina, actually that content is what we've been doing all along. So there are always baseline pronunciation samples and baseline presentations at the beginning, and listening and speaking diagnostics. And then at the end, there are the final samples using some of the same materials and some different. So we've always done that, but the challenge for me has been never having had to do learning objectives and assessments other than what we do for the students in the class. But that really helps to get that confirmation that our baseline and final, approach, is what you would recommend as well.
Yes,
So,
absolutely, absolutely. And I would, take a look at what kind of tools do you use to assess?
So I created some tools and used some from my private work. So for example, in the TA class for international teaching assistants, they do a baseline presentation at the beginning, introducing themselves, and there's structure to it, about 5 minutes, covering different points. And then they also do a baseline speaking sample from their textbook. And others from their own field-specific material. So we're also helping them with different terminology from their fields and comparing pronunciation, intonation, word choice, and usage from the beginning to the end of the class. In a pronunciation course, we actually have a structured listening and speaking diagnostic that we use as a pretest. And then we do the same one at the end as a post-test, and it's used as a teaching tool that students can strive to do better on it because they want to see that improvement, but in fact, it's what we're teaching through the whole course. And so they're getting a preview of the whole semester at the beginning and then a review of the whole semester at the end.
That's great. What I would recommend is I would not fall into, I would hate saying, I would not fall into the trap of, well, I have to do a quiz in Canvas to assess, or I have to do, whatever to get that grade. I mean, it sounds like what you're doing is good. And I think in any kind of either virtual or face-to-face, you're able to make those assessments. I would recommend rubrics. If you have any type of rubric, it helps the student and really give more of a objective kind of analysis of whatever you're taking a look at as far as, enunciations or, whatever you're assessing. But I would recommend not to feel pressured to go into, oh, well, I need to set up some sort of assessment that's a quiz, or because what you're doing is at a skill level, and you don't want to change that to analyze at a knowledge level. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. I really do appreciate that too. I am deconstructing the entire courses to flip the classroom and do more asynchronous work that they can do, and then hope that they'll do this in advance and we can use the synchronous class time, small group, and individual consultations for really helping them more with their own needs. So that's really helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, Canvas it's new to me. So your session on modules was really helpful yesterday.
Good.
I would love to get that PowerPoint. And,
oh yes, you sent me an email, and I've been swamped.
I understand. I've seen you all day today.
I will get that to you, and I will also send you a link to, I did a little webinar on how to use the template, and I'll send that to you as well. So you can it helps understand how it's set up and how to go in there and edit some things.
That's great. And I just really like to thank you, and also Jennifer and Addie and Faye, I know is here. Because I really struggled with the Quality Matters type training, and what I need is these hands-on practical sessions that we have now to really build out my courses. So just thanks for all the trainings.
Yeah, well, great. I'm happy that they've been helpful. I'm very happy. Okay, and it looks like you're the only one left, but I'm going to go ahead and disconnect us because I also have a training at noon and I have to run to a class today.
Well, thanks for the private coaching.
Yes, and good luck. And I will definitely, it may be tomorrow before I can get you the template, but I will get that to you.
That's fine. I took a few screenshots, so I have a little idea of what you were doing that helps. But
Okay.
yes, thank you, Christina.
right.
Good luck with everything
Okay.
else.
Thanks.
Okay,
Take
bye.
care. Bye. Bye, Laura. And